things are actually getting worse by the day for Justin Trudeau. Not only are they looking at replacing him, but they're looking at replacing people from his cabinet, such as Freeland. Anywhere Justin Trudeau goes, him or his motorcade gets blocked and brutally heckled. And finally, his attack on political prisoners is not working the way that he intended here in Canada. These are all things we're going to be taking a look at today. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I want to encourage you guys to smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get into the video, I do want to make an announcement. I've said it at least on one video in the past that I have a just shy of 40-foot fifth wheel, a 2022 make and model Cougar Keystone 368 MBI that is for sale on the west coast of Canada. It's what I lived in with my family before I bought this house, and we don't need it now. I don't even live on Vancouver Island currently. It's in storage, and if you are looking to take over this fifth wheel and use it because it's just not being used right now, I would hate to see this thing go to absolute waste. Then send me an email. I will put the link to that email down below in the description or the pinned comment below. Here's the video. So looking at the polls, there still is no movement. It has not updated, but it will tomorrow. 209 projected. The Liberals, I'm calling it now, folks. They're going to drop from 70 down to 58 or 59. But let me know what your guess is down below, and still 99% likely to win the most seats and for a majority government. Someone who hasn't really been in the news in a while is Maxime Bernier, the leader of the PPC. Well, you remember those Indian workers that are out on the East Coast who to be the bad guy in PEI or Charlottetown? Well, their visas are expiring and they have to go back. And Maxime Bernier actually went there and spoke to some of them face to face. Kind of bold. And to be honest, he's the only really politician that has done this. I know he doesn't have a seat in the House right now, but he used to be in the House, and I mean, he's trying to regain any sort of traction. And I mean, going after immigration is kind of a big thing. I mean, Pierre only recently said that 1.2 million immigrants per year isn't sustainable, but boots on the ground and actually talking to immigrants face to face it's one step higher than what anyone else has done. So let's take a look at what Max has to say. I told the Indian foreign workers in Charlottetown protesting to get permanent residency that when their work permit is expired, they must be deported. We don't need you in this country. There's young Canadians that can work at Tim Hortons, which, I mean, do people disagree with that? Do the majority agree with that? Let me know down in the comments.
Stay.
Now you can stay, but when they're going to be expired,
we will see at that moment.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, if some of you have their permit that are expired,
nobody standing here is illegal. They have their permits.
But in your group of 100 people,
nobody is expired. If they would have been expired, they would have been deported.
Okay, but they will be deported when it be expired.
This is why. No, they won't be deported.
You just said that when it's going to be expired, they will be deported.
They will be legalizing their stay. No deportation will be needed in that moment.
But we will need deportation.
That's why you need to have full knowledge. You are a leader. I think you should have a full knowledge before you get in here.
I have a full knowledge. I'm saying when the permit is expired, you must be deported.
You are saying my permit is expired. It isn't.
No, if it's not, but it will be in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months.
I can extend it.
But I hope they won't, because we don't need
they
you.
Will.
No, we don't need you here in this country.
How can you decide it?
Because
for example, listen to me.
There's Canadians, there's young Canadians that can work at Tim Hortons.
Then they can. I'm not working.
Wow, that is very, very bold. And I think that a lot of people are waking up to our immigration problem right now, that we don't have enough jobs. We don't have enough houses. We don't have the infrastructure to accommodate even temporary immigrants on work visas. Like it's kind of getting out of control. But I want to know what you guys think down below of saying that to an immigrant's face, that we don't need you. We have young Canadians that can work at Tim Hortons, which, I mean, obviously once upon a time that was the case. You had younger Canadians or Canadians working at Tim Hortons, and now it really is most of those jobs are filled with immigrant workers. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. All right, so now we're going to take a look at Tommy Robinson, who's from the UK. We talked about it a little bit before. Ezra Levant and him are doing their rounds together. They're working in conjunction. They're doing, stadium speeches and stuff like that. Well, when Tommy Robinson landed in Canada, he was pretty much taken into police custody right away and arrested. And he was told that he's not allowed to leave the country. He can't even go back home to the UK. He's forced to stay here, and he's forced to stay south of Red Deer, Alberta. He couldn't go up to Edmonton where they had a scheduled speech. He couldn't go to Toronto because obviously that's not in Alberta. There was these crazy restrictions that geo-locked him. Well, it sounds like those conditions have been lifted here. So Tommy Robinson is saying, I'm unbelievably happy we won. After being arrested but not charged and having conditions placed on me that prevented my freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, I am now able to go wherever I want as an honorary Canadian. To all my detractors, haters, and supporters of Castro's illegitimate man baby, have a wonderful day. You know what, Tommy Robinson? You want to win Canadians over? You just nailed it right on the head with that last sentence. Castro's illegitimate man baby. That is awesome. Let's take a look at this video here.
So, I have my passport back. I'm on my way to Toronto, which is a massive win. Which wouldn't have happened without your support and without the lawyers, okay? It just wouldn't have happened. I wasn't even allowed to go home. I'm now going to travel to Toronto, give my speech, exercise my free speech in the best way possible at an event. You can still get tickets to that. It's at tommytour.ca. It's on Sunday. And yeah, I've had my tickets, my passport returned. Ezra, what's your thoughts?
Tommy, this is amazing. I mean, David and Goliath doesn't even capture it. Not only are you free to go and give a speech in Toronto, but there's no deportation order, there's no ban. You are leaving as a welcome and honored guest. We're delighted to have you. And every single Canadian who saw that arrest the other day knows that has never happened before. Trudeau has never arrested, let alone sent 8 cops to arrest someone for immigration reasons. He's never banned them from traveling. It was 2-tier policing. And I want to thank our super lawyers for fighting for freedom. I haven't got their legal bill yet. If you want to help me, go to savetommy.com. But all credit to the lawyers. And I want to tell you, sometimes you think you can't win when you fight the government.
I didn't think we could win.
But you got to try. And today's a great victory day. Congrats, Tommy.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. And Michael, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm glad that you had a positive outcome. It was a great outcome.
I wasn't expecting that outcome either, if I'm honest. I wasn't expecting it. And I know that behind the scenes you were looking at every other avenue of what we could legally do, if not.
Yeah, no, we were looking at the other options, and frankly, this was the best option and the one we hoped for. And luckily, they were very reasonable about it. I got hats off to them. They did not have to do this, and I'm just glad they did.
So am I. And I don't think without your support, Navi, as well, thank you.
Thank you so much. We're glad at the positive outcome, and looking forward to that event on Sunday.
Without lawyers, honestly, I'd be stuck in Calgary. It's my daughter's birthday next week, which is what I was concerned about. I didn't want to say it publicly. It's my daughter's birthday. I weren't even allowed to go home. So I'm not just allowed to go do my tour. I've got my passport back, okay? Free to go. So I'll be going to Toronto. I'm excited. I'm shocked as well. And it is a David versus Goliath, and it shows, for me, it proves that what's happened this week shouldn't have happened. I should have been free to go to Edmonton, I should have been free to travel this country, I should have been free to give my discussions and my talks, and now I'm coming to Toronto, so make sure you're there, tommytour.ca.
That is wild. I mean, Justin Trudeau has sent in stormtroopers to arrest people. I mean, even when Tamara was very wrongfully arrested on, I think it was the side of the street, they sent in like an absurd amount of cops to arrest just like a petite woman. It doesn't make any sense at all. So sending 8 cops to arrest Tommy Robinson when he's not done anything wrong, it just goes to show. And again, like they said, this has never ever happened before for an immigration case. And I will go out on a limb and say that I think that that's right. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. As somebody who consumes the news, I've never once seen, persons stayed longer for their visa and there was calls for deportation and they sent in 8 cops, right? Like, never once have I ever seen that. In fact, I'm going to actually say the opposite, that Canada lets in criminals from other countries to immigrate here temporarily or get permanent residency. They commit crimes here because they're criminals from other countries, and we still don't have that same level of law enforcement presence when it comes time to arrest them as they did for Tommy Robinson. I mean, they've sent in 2-3 cops to arrest criminals that are immigrants versus 8 cops for Tommy Robinson. Doesn't make any sense, but it just goes to show that Justin Trudeau is off his rocker. Like, he's gone totally power hungry and insane, which is exactly why he finds himself in this position here where he's being heckled and he's being told that it's shame, and people are basically chasing his motorcade out, which is, I mean, that's just craziness that it's gotten to this point that anywhere Trudeau shows up, especially in a motorcade, people are literally, they're not like swarming it in a dangerous way, but they're swarming it in the sense that people are gathering around and saying, F you, F you, F you, shame, shame, you're ruining this country. But let's take a look at this video here. So I would like to point out the fact that the biggest flag there was the F Trudeau. The most popular flag there was the Canadian flag. And there is only one Palestinian flag, which is an improvement, folks. It is an improvement because a lot of people are getting a little bit upset that there has been more Palestinian flags in certain areas flown than Canadian flags since we are living in Canada. But it seems like now that whole movement is kind of fizzling down a little bit, and we're getting back to pro-Canada, especially with Canada Day just right around the corner. And speaking right around the corner, it's not looking like Chrystia Freeland's going to have a job for much longer. Mark Carney is set to actually replace her. Mark Carney is in talks with Justin Trudeau about joining the team as finance minister. And this comes from National News Watch, where they link a Toronto Star article, which we're going to take a look at in a moment. This tweet almost has 250,000 views, which is insane. And when you look at the comments, Mark Carney is an elitist. Sure, he has more experience in Freeland, but he is still no better. He has no place in government as far as I'm concerned. Plus, doesn't he need a seat? Which is, I mean, that's going to be, thrown into question is how is Mark Carney going to replace Freeland as finance minister or take any MP's position when he hasn't won any single riding? So maybe they're going to put him in a riding, hope that he wins so that he can get that position. I'm not exactly sure the legalities of that, but it doesn't seem like they can do that legally. But we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to wait and see how this turns out. And I mean, he's not the only one that is set to join. You also have, we covered this yesterday, Wayne Long, a Liberal MP on the East Coast, where he writes a letter to Justin Trudeau, to caucus, calling on Trudeau to resign. We need new leadership. This is the new narrative, folks, from inside the Liberals cabinet and from mainstream media. Everybody is calling for Justin Trudeau to resign. And I just kind of want to pass the question off to you. What do you think? Should Trudeau resign? Should he go the distance? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. We're going to take a look at a recent interview of Mark Carney with Vashi from CTV and see what his talking points are, because this is kind of the dangerous territory. Look, I'm not a fan of Mark Carney at all, but if we're talking about him replacing Chrystia Freeland as finance minister, he was the governor of not only the Bank of Canada, but the Bank of England. I mean, he is way more qualified than Chrystia Freeland. And I think that he would go out and say budgets don't balance themselves. Let me take a look at the finances and we're going to come up with a good plan to get Canada back on track. And that is a very dangerous place to be in. Look, I'm not a fan of Mark Carney, but if he comes into that position and starts, giving a plan to actually get Canada back on track financially for our economy, I mean, that's what we all want, but we don't want a Liberal to do that. Not at all. In fact, every single Liberal MP who's in power right now, it's almost best. It's almost best. And this is like the double-edged sword, because we want Freeland to go. We want even Jagmeet to go. We want Trudeau to go. But they are so bad at their job that when it comes time to vote, they are not going to win. So they can go down with the ship, or if they get replaced, it might be somebody in there who's even more dangerous and more knowledgeable than those who currently hold those positions. So that's kind of the predicament that Canada's in right now. But let me know what you guys think. Let's take a look at what Mark Carney has to say.
Is there a risk of waiting too long and a so-called hard landing, given, for example, the number of Canadians who will face mortgage renewals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is always a risk. There's risks on both sides. Inflation could be stronger, or the bank could wait too long, or other factors could intervene. But without question, one of the big factors is, yes, Canadians have big mortgage renewals. A number of them have already had their mortgages renewed and substantially higher interest payments. That restricts the economy. It restricts what they can do. They feel the pain, and the bank takes that into account. So that's one of the reasons why interest rates are a bit lower in Canada than they are in the United States. It's one of the reasons why I'm more confident on the timing of maybe of when the Bank of Canada would begin to cut rates than when the Federal Reserve would.
You mentioned sort of the shocks to the system that the pandemic provided, and one of them on the inflation side, of course, is around supply.
Yeah.
We have been very focused on those supply shocks as we talk about inflation over the past 18 months, but the conversation in this country more recently has shifted to one issue on the demand side, and in particular, immigration policy.
Yeah. Yeah.
There have been a number of economists musing lately about the relative capacity of the economy to absorb the level of immigration, which is very different than even a few years ago when immigration was seen as the key driver of our economy. Are you worried about the absorptive capacity of the economy at the current level of immigration? Okay,
so the first thing I'd say is that immigration, so new workers coming into Canada, the track record is great. It's it's a testament to Canadians and our institutions that we welcome new immigrants, they get integrated into the economy, they become productive, they become Canadians, and they move forward. Now, there's a difference, and as you know, part of the big surge in people coming into Canada has been students, post-secondary students. And post-secondary students, most of them, what they're supposed to do is study. They might have a job on the side, but they're studying. And so there's a demand for goods and services, housing, the most obvious example, but they're not necessarily increasing yet the productive capacity of the economy, and that's where you get those frictions. So what we've seen is that big surge in post-secondary students, student visas, and that's something I think the immigration minister began to act on this week.
Do you think while they are focused on increasing supply, and while we wait for the policies that have been introduced so far to take effect, the government might be forced to be more restrictive on its immigration policy, or would you advise against that?
Well, I think
beyond what's already announced.
Policy, beyond what's done, I think our policy of welcoming immigrants who integrate into the labor force, make us stronger, that works. And in my judgment, we can keep with that core policy. It's part of the essence of Canada, but also just, I hate to do it, but you're asking me as an economist, it is effective, and in fact, most of the growth we've had in Canada in recent years has come from the growth in labor supply, including adding to our overall level of activity in the economy. So that's a net good thing. Where we've gone off course is in the scale of post-secondary students, in my judgment. So yes, you can always get better, you can always be more targeted, but broad brush, I think our policies worked. And the adjustments that are starting to be made are putting us on the right track.
The discussion around immigration right now and its intersection with housing policy is very much focused on what so many Canadians are confronting, which is a real challenge with affordability, a cost of living crisis.
And that's scary. That's dangerous territory, because if Mark Carney is able to present ideas to the table that could make life more affordable, if he's able to provide a plan, make amendments to the budget, or just win people over, not win you over, win me over, but win people over with his speeches, with things that he has to say, then we could be looking at some serious trouble. And don't get me wrong, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, they are absolutely tanking in the polls. And the only thing that could save them is a massive change. I mean, there's nothing that Trudeau could do. There's nothing that Freeland could do to bring the polls back up, to bring confidence from anybody back up. They have ruined their own reputation. They have made their bed. They have to lie in it now. But if we just entertain the idea for a moment of someone else stepping in, I don't know if Mark Carney is the best to fix the Liberal cabinet. I'm not going to try and give them pointers at all, but I do think that quite literally anybody other than who we currently have is better. And Mark Carney has, I mean, a pretty stacked resume working as the governor of Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. And when we're in a time of hardship financially, that type of resume does seem attractive, or it could seem attractive to certain individuals. So that's just, it's really scary. But I don't actually think that they can legally just swap out Freeland from her seat.
Opposition has very successfully tied the government's climate policy, and in particular their price on carbon or their carbon tax, to the issue of affordability. Why do you think, despite the rebate that's in place, the government has failed to convince a majority of Canadians, if the polls are accurate, that it is sound policy and worth it?
Well, you're asking me a question in terms of positioning and the actual policy. I mean, when you get the rebate, you and I both get the rebate, everyone watching gets the rebate, 70% or so of Canadians get more in their rebate than they pay in their tax in the price on carbon. It's hard to track the second aspect, and with the first aspect, when you get the rebate, even when I first got the rebate, I looked at it and thought, I wonder if that's the carbon rebate. And it turns out it was. So look, it's partly on positioning. I don't think it's been as communicated. I mean, here's a real insight. It has not been communicated as well as it should have been. And the fact is, let me flip it around. If we took away the price on pollution, more than two-thirds of Canadians would be worse off. They would receive less than, they get the price off on the carbon they're spending, but they would receive less in terms of the transfer. And I think very few people understand that. It is not apparent that the leader of the opposition even understands that, or certainly his rhetoric is totally inconsistent with that.
But his rhetoric appears to have resonated with Canadians.
Well, look, Canadians respond to facts, and we need to get the facts in front of Canadians and let Canadians make those decisions. But climate policy and making Canada a better economy, a more efficient economy, more sustainable economy, those are all aligned. And it is about much more than just the price on pollution, the carbon tax. It's about what's happening in the auto sector. It's about whether how quickly we move to a clean grid. And it's very importantly, and this is an area I think, to go back to housing, we need to double, triple, quadruple down on, which is to help Canadians have better housing. Not just new Canadians, not just the new houses we're building, but the efficiency of those houses, because it's tangible, it goes directly to them. It's going to lower their heating bills and cooling bills in the summer, because after living through the summer we just had, we know how important that is. So we need to focus on those issues at the same time as the more broad-based structural things such as the carbon price.
Can you do stuff like that? And I'm thinking, for example, of the heat pump subsidies that were kind of brought in at the same time as this carbon tax carve-out, which ended up being this huge political issue. Are you able to do the kinds of things you're talking about, have a serious policy towards climate without a price on carbon?
It's one of the most effective instruments, but it is very much a world of and I think you have to have multiple elements, including, very importantly, and this is fundamentally true in Canada, but it's true around the world, you need to deliver for people today at the same time as we're making these investments. And we're beginning as a country to make huge investments for the medium and long term, which is going to make us more competitive. Think of the auto sector, think of clean energy, think of what's beginning to happen in the Canadian nuclear sector, world-leading sector that is being revitalized and is going to make a huge difference to this country around the world. That's all very interesting, but Canadians are worried about their wages, they're worried about their jobs, and they're being squeezed by the mortgage rates, the cost of rent, the cost of housing, And so they need to see tangible returns today, or at least the prospect of that. And in and around housing is one of the ways we can do it.
You talked about governing and making choices.
Yikes.
Last November, you told the Globe.
I don't like how calm and collected he is when he talks, because it's a big difference from the Liberals. I mean, when you have Justin Trudeau talk, sure, he could remain calm, right? Find that inner peace. But when it comes time to answer any question or provide any sort of substance and expand on any given point, he talks in circles, and it takes forever for him to get a point across. And half the time, he beats around the bush. He's a professional bullshitter. Whereas, I mean, you can have your opinion about Mark Carney, but I'm seeing quite a bit of competence here in this interview.
Mail that you hadn't ruled out a run for the Liberal leadership. Is that still the case?
Well, there is. It's easy not to rule out something that doesn't exist. So it's we're in the hypothetical of hypothetical.
Well, it's hypothetical, but
look,
you know, and I'll be blunt with you. You know as well as anyone, we're in Ottawa right now. I'm not sure if everyone across the country is discussing the potential for who's going to run where, but in Ottawa, it continues to be something that is constantly discussed, and you have yet to say no, it's not going to happen.
Well, first thing.
Not to say that you should. I'm just asking.
I hope I have a few years left in me, but let's be clear about the near term. We've been rightly talking about issues of the medium term, but the near term, the Prime Minister is going to be the leader of the Liberal Party in the next election, and that's clear.
You believe that to be the case?
Absolutely, and I support him. And the issue for Canadians, which is why you focused on them, is the here and now. How do we get on top of the cost of living? What's going to deliver today, and what's going to deliver in the medium term? And so we've talked about investments and what the government can do in housing, rightly so, how it links back into decarbonization. I want to add one other thing, which I think we should spend much more time on as a country, which is the competition, the degree of competition in our major industries. So whether we look at on the telco side, whether we look at new entrants in financial services, across in the grocery sector, in the retail sector, we pay as a whole higher proportions of the price of those services than most other major economies. And it's not just down to geography, it's down to competition. And I think those are some of the issues. We Canadians are hurting. We understand cost of living. The bank is getting on top of inflation. I'm confident that they will get on top of it and get in the right direction. But that will still mean prices are high.
We're familiar.
Yeah, we're all familiar. Yeah. There's inflation, and then there's the level of prices, and so the question becomes.
So that is something, again, like here's the level of competence that I'm talking about, right? Is that he's acknowledging that the Bank of Canada's inflation is being lowered, and you and I likely see eye to eye on this. I personally disagree. I think that they're making stuff up or something doesn't seem right. But he also just acknowledged that the price of goods is still very high. Even though inflation is coming down, the price of goods is really high, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And that's the type of competence that I'm talking about that could be a massive threat to this next election, because you have Freeland who said, no, everything's fine. Inflation is down. We need to actually spend more on fighting climate change. And the same is said from Justin Trudeau. No one has acknowledged that the cost of living is still very high, at least from the Liberal side, right? Pierre Poilievre, of course, he's acknowledged it. The Conservatives, absolutely, they've acknowledged it. When I'm talking about this, I'm just referring to people on the left or even the NDP. And this is the stuff that I'm talking about, man. It's that's going to resonate with people, because I agree that cost of living is too high. It just came out of Mark Carney's mouth. So if he were to if he were to get into a Liberal seat or whatever and start preaching that, I mean, people would say, oh, someone from the Liberal side also agrees that the cost of living is really, really high? Let's go pay attention, because so far the rhetoric from the Liberals has been, everything is fine. We need to spend more money. We need to spend more money. We need to go further into debt. And that doesn't seem to be the approach from Mark Carney.
But what else are we doing to help become more productive, more efficient, squeeze out those prices, today and tomorrow. And a big part of that is having more competition.
You obviously have a lot of ideas about the kinds of policies the federal government could pursue. Would you ever entertain a position, since you are convinced the Prime Minister will lead the Liberals into the next election, as a cabinet minister?
Well, look, you don't just hand out positions as cabinet ministers, but you do hand out gratuitous advice, which is what I've been doing. Look, I care, this is my country, I care deeply about it. I've had the honor of serving in roles here, both in the public service and as governor. And this is a time of consequence. These are big issues we've been touching on, the reshaping of the global economy, where Canada is going, how we deliver for Canadians today and tomorrow. And there's various ways to contribute to that, and I always look for opportunities to do that.
I didn't hear a no there for sure.
You heard a lot of words.
I heard a lot of words that weren't a no. Mr. Carney.
See, that was a very strategic non-answer. It wasn't the typical beating around the bush. I'm going to just kill time and take up airspace and say a bunch of words. He very strategically doesn't deny not running for prime minister or having a cabinet position, because, ladies and gentlemen, that interview is from April. And we all know what's happened since April. I mean, the Liberals have tanked in the polls. They've lost a by-election, and now they are going to do a reshuffle. They did don't forget, last year, they did a reshuffle. The Liberals did a reshuffle in around July and August, and it was massive. Marco Mendicino went from being at the front to all the way in the back in the shadows, and then he went to the gym, lost a bunch of weight, and now he's being spat on, right? That's just one of the many MPs that took a bit of a leave of absence or stepped out of the spotlight. You're going to see another cabinet shuffle because it's the last opportunity before they start campaigning for the elections, and they're not going to do a reshuffle this time next year because it's going to be months before the election. And there's just not enough time for people to understand really what's going on in terms of, hey, yeah, this person who was in this riding is now in a different riding. Vote for them because we say so. Like, it's just not enough time to get accustomed to the changes, right? A lot of crazy stuff is about to happen, which is exactly why you should be subscribed to this channel. And hopefully you turn post notifications on so you can be notified of upcoming videos. And don't forget, I will be live streaming tonight, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you guys there. Peace and love, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.